Snap Studios. Snap Judgment is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. If you love iPhone, you'll love Apple Card. It comes with the privacy and security you expect from Apple, plus you earn up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase, which can automatically earn interest when you open a high-yield savings account through Apple Card. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app. Subject to credit approval, savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Apple Card and Savings by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Salt Lake City branch, member FDIC. Terms and more at applecard.com. I've avoided it for a long time, for years, but finally, one chilly Saturday, hoodie clutched tight over my head, I take the ferry over the water to this fortress-like building set against the San Francisco Bay. Alcatraz Prison, commanding its own island. Once the flagship prison of the federal incarceration system, now decommissioned, empty. And stepping off the boat, my guide, Mary, she leads me past the plaque, past the 3-foot-thick concrete walls into shadow, up this metal staircase, through the imagined screams of thousands of angry men, past one tier, then to another, until finally we turn again. Walk past lines of iron bars where she directs me into this tiny, tiny cell that I do not wish to enter. 5 feet by 9 feet tiny. Just a metal bed, a sink, and a toilet. Not enough room for the two of us. No window. You can't see the bay that is just outside, but somehow you can feel the wind whipping over the winter waters. We sit in this gloom. Cold. Cold from the walls, cold from the bars, from the floor. And Mary tells me that in the not-too-distant past, when this was an active men's prison, because of some peculiar trick of sound and acoustics, a person caged right here at night can hear across the water, can hear voices from very different circumstances. Men chatting up the beautiful daughters of high society, cocktail parties, music, the tinkling of wine glasses. And when Mary leaves here, leaves me alone, when her footsteps finally vanish, I listen for the creak, for the shift, the rattle of this rotting building. And I imagine the happy, cheery voices, the sensuous whispers, just over there. So close. So very close. On the other side of these concrete walls. Smoke starts. Now. so very close. We know that isolation from our familiar changes us. We adapt, we transform, we understand this. What we may be less aware of is that isolation forces us to see, to really see and experience our environments in wholly new ways. Sometimes giving us a chance to finally witness what's always been out there. Today, we meet Forrest. He's an engineer for a gas company on the north slope of Alaska. And the North Slope is remote. Hundreds of miles away from any city, just tundra and mountains for as far as the eye can see. Forrest travels between Seattle and Alaska for work, and when our story begins, he's just arrived back on the North Slope. Spooked.
It's a huge facility that houses about 5,000 workers at any one time. And they have dormitories, they have gyms, movie theaters, cafeterias. They have everything to kind of make you feel like you're at home, even though you're, thousands of miles away and in the middle of nowhere. I'm getting settled into my room. I'm getting things unpacked. I turn on my work computer. I'm checking emails, and there's an email alert for a Phase 3 storm alert. So a Phase 1 is it's just a regular snowstorm. A Phase 2 is a little bit more severe. But a Phase 3 is a total shutdown of the North Slope. You have winds above 60 miles an hour. You have temperatures below, negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It's complete whiteout. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Most of the work that we do is always outside. It's always on well sites, so we can't work. It basically shuts us down completely. So they call a Phase 3, and, I kind of grumble and settle down because I know it's going to be a while. We're just trapped inside for however long the storm lasts. The storm just did not let up. We'd been up there for about 5 days at that point. Just sitting in a little bunk room, watching TV, sitting on the internet, going to the gym. It gets old. I'm getting ready to go out and get some breakfast and then probably go to the gym and hang out. And I hear this tapping on my window. I just think it was, I just leave it up to the storm. Maybe it's ice hitting the windows, or maybe something that's hanging off the roof and smacking against the window. And so, I open up my blinds, but looking out there, I don't see anything that could possibly explain it. I just get dressed and I go down to the gym. After I get back to my room after working out, I hear that tapping again. And I open up the blinds. From my window looking down, I can see into the facility parking lots where we usually park our equipment. And the only illumination is from a pair of street lights or yard lights. I can see a person standing under one of these yard lights. It's dark. I can't make out any details other than a head and some shoulders and some legs. but there's just somebody out there. What the hell? It is incredibly cold. It is, with the wind chill, I believe it was around -60. That's instant frostbite if you have exposed skin. You don't survive cold like that for very long. So I need to get this person help. The guy dorming next to me, I knock on his door and I'm like, hey, you need to take a look at this. And we go out to his window. He opens up his blinds and he's like, what the hell is this guy doing out there? So now I feel confirmed. It's not just me hallucinating or, my mind playing tricks on me. There's somebody else that has actually seen this guy out there. So we get a hold of our supervisor. We're on speakerphone and we're telling him what we're seeing. There's a guy out there. Do you mind looking out your window and seeing if you can see him? And sure enough, he can see this guy under this lamp. But he's like, you guys didn't tell me that there was a second guy out there. And we're like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, well, there's 2 people under the streetlight. So we go back to the window and look out, and now there is a second guy. Not only am I worried for these guys, I'm also weirded out by the fact that now there are 2 people out there. My supervisor says, I got a hold of security. They're going to head out there and see if they can find these guys. The only problem is they have to dig out of the door because we're snowed in. All of the doors leaving the building are covered in waist-deep snow. How could these guys get outside if the security forces to go rescue them have to dig their way out? I go down and try to help the security guards move away the snow from the door and try to get the doors open. And as we're working on this, we're all realizing that the storm is way too severe for us to even think about trying to get out there. You take a shovel full of snow and move it, the wind just brings it right back in. I go up to my room to look back out there, down into the parking lot, and I don't see anybody out there. I don't see anything going on. The next day, the security team was able to get some snowshoes, and they were able to pair up and go out there on top of the snow. I ran into one of the security guards at the mess hall, and I was asking him about it. And I'm like, did you guys find anything out there? Did you guys see anything? And he just says, no, there was no tracks. There were no marks in the snow. There was just nothing, no trace of anybody. You guys were, probably just hallucinating. And I'm like, all of us were hallucinating? Some people up there think if you get trapped or snowed into the building for long enough, you start to just get so bored that your brain starts to play tricks on you to keep you entertained. But it's just not possible because it was seen by not only me, but several coworkers and my supervisor from different angles. I'm an engineer. My whole life is based on hypothesis, testing, theories, proof of execution, things like that. And to have something make totally no sense, it's just really unnerving. Later that day, I end up going down to the mess hall for dinner, and I see my friend John. He's a local Inuit. He's a good friend of mine. So I sit down with him to have dinner, and we start talking just about what's been going on, how being locked up in the man camp for a few days has been. And I relay him this story of seeing these guys out in the snow and several other people seeing it, and he just laughs. And I'm like, well, what's so funny? And he goes, "You guys saw a Tuniat." And I said, a what? And he said, "A Tuniat." He goes on to explain that before the Inuit came to Alaska, before they crossed the Bering Sea, when they got here, there were already people here in what is now the North Slope. And they called them the Tuniat. He's telling us the Inuit and the Tuniat lived together for generations. And he goes into this legend of one of the Inuit ended up killing one of the Tuniat over a canoe. And at that point on, the Tuniat were worried that they would become targets of the Inuit, so they disappeared off the face of the earth. He goes, some people think that they went to the ocean. Some people think that they went into the earth and they live in the permafrost. And he says some people think they just went to the other world. To me, this is a totally captivating, story. I'm like, what? I've never heard of any of this before. He says that after they left and they went wherever they did go, they will periodically come back and pull pranks on the local Inuit. Sometimes you'll even have people disappear from the villages. They're not necessarily friendly.
Hold on, because after the break, something continues to lurk on the North Slope. Stay tuned. When you hear people speaking about race and identity, I feel like too often they switch into some sort of weird babble that is not really English. It's not really real. It's preachy, it's sanitized, or it's crazy. But on Code Switch, they speak English. Like regular people, like you would speak to your friends and to your family about things that really matter. How race and identity shape your world in surprising, funny, and confusing ways. Like what makes a good race joke? Or as a premium nerd, I really dug the discussion about race in fantasy realms like Dungeons and Dragons. So often listening to this show, they say what I was only thinking, or really, what I wished I had been thinking if I was funny and clever. It's not about race and identity in some sanitized nowhere. They keep it real about how things work here at home. In fact, Code Switch recently did an episode of What If Your Church Doesn't Like You Back? I was like, did they grow up next to me? Listen now to Code Switch from NPR, wherever you get your podcast.
Nah, not quite.
What's up?
Sell my car on Carvana. It's just not quite the right time.
Crazy coincidence. I just sold my car to Carvana.
What? I told you about it 2 days ago.
When you know, you know. You know? I'm even dropping it off at one of those sweet car vending machines and getting paid today.
That's a good deal.
Oh, great deal. Come on. What's your heart saying?
You're right. When you know...
You know.
Sold.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to Snap Judgment. We're dancing in dark celebration with our supernatural sister podcast, Spooked. You're listening to our Howl episode. When last we left, a storm was raging on the North Slope in Alaska, and something is out there in the snow. Something watching, something waiting. Spooked.
He was telling me when he was a kid, his grandfather saw a Tuniat out on the tundra, and they went inside, and when they came back out the next day, all of their hunting equipment was destroyed. I'm thinking, that's a really cool legend, but I don't think that I saw a Tuniat out there. He's just telling us ghost stories, trying to freak us out. We're on like day 13 15 of the storm going on. It was like somebody snapped their fingers and this storm just stopped. And the skies cleared up. You could see stars and auroras. It was really pretty. Like it was kind of like a fireworks show after the show has gone on. Then the work began. We get out to the parking lot and we start the long process of digging out our trucks, which are under probably about 20 feet of snow at this point. There's about 7 or 8 of us out there. We've all just got hand shovels and we're digging through this snow. The first thing we notice as we're digging the front of the truck out is the radiator has been like crushed. It looks almost like a fist went through it. Like somebody was sitting there and punching it. It's totally confusing. There's no way to really rationalize how the radiator ended up like that. We keep digging everything out. We find several of the tires have been not slashed. There were chunks of rubber missing from these tires. They almost look like a wild animal had chewed on them. But there's no tracks out there anywhere. There's no signs of any kind of animal. And we get to the back of the truck, and that's where the cabin is. Me being the engineer, I've got to jump up there and start turning things on and seeing if everything's working properly. I open this door, and what I'm seeing doesn't just send shivers down my back, but it just basically stops my heart. It looks like a complete disaster zone. All the electrical panels have been shorted. Like you can see actual burn marks and scorch marks on the electrical panels. The joystick that we use to move the winch up and down has been snapped off. The chairs that we sit on are all torn up. I don't even know what to make of this. It looked almost like you'd let a polar bear loose in the cabin for an hour or two, just totally destroyed. But that door was locked. Nobody should have been able to get into that and do the kind of damage that they did. My blood's kind of running cold. The hair on the back of my neck is standing up because none of this is making any sense. We come back after a long day of digging out snow and trying to fix this truck, and we're talking with several other people from different divisions at dinner, and we're talking to them about what we saw. Like, hey man, our truck is totally destroyed. And they're like, oh, you too? Yeah, our tires were all slashed up. Somebody broke out the front windshield of our truck. It seemed like somebody bent the frame on this one truck and moved it over here. Everybody in the camp had something affecting their equipment. I'm like, what is going on? There's no way that it could have been vandals with the whiteout conditions and the snow and how deep it was. It would be impossible for anybody to drive. Animals don't make sense. Ice flying around or rocks flying around. Nothing's making sense. It's slowly kind of coming over me that maybe John's right. Maybe it was something supernatural actually happening. It's creepy. It's unsettling. But I can't come to any other conclusion other than the legend of the toonie. It actually is real. It's April, so it's only a few months after this snowing in event. We go out to a well site, and we have to have a bulldozer go with us because he needs to clear the site of snow. Nobody's been on that site since the blizzard happened. The bulldozer goes out before us about 2 hours. I'm getting my equipment ready with my crew, 3 other guys. Bulldozer operator gets on the radio, and he's like, hey, I just want to let you guys know that I've cleared the site. Everything looks good. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that I saw what I think is a wolf out on the pad. And we're like, well, that's unusual. Wolves are not on the North Slope. The closest wolves live up there is on the Brooks Range, which is like 150 miles to the south. And it's very rare for a wolf to get separated from their pack and end up way out on the tundra. The bulldozer operator lets us know, hey, just keep an eye out for him, just in case. I drive out there with my crew. We set up our equipment. We get cranes in the air. We're getting the equipment onto the wellhead. We're working on the oil well just to make sure everything is good to go. I need to use the bathroom, so I go out behind the well house and I do my business. While I'm out there, I get a call over the radio. It's one of my workers, Eric, and he's like, hey, I just saw that wolf that guy was talking about. And my heart stops. And I don't have time to think about whether this is a prank or not. I just need to get out of there as fast as possible because I'm completely vulnerable. I'm completely helpless out there. I'm running back to the truck as fast as I can. My heart is racing. I feel like I am on like 5 cans of Red Bull. I throw the door open. I jump in the cab. Once I'm safe inside, I look back, and there's this giant wolf just trotting along right where I was, just right behind me, coming towards the truck. His fur is jet black. He's missing his right eye, and he's missing the skin on his mouth, so he's got this great big, almost like smile, a toothy smile on the right side of his face. His left eye is bright red, and he's massive. He's probably about 6 or 7 feet long. So we get on the main radio to call for the bear police. They keep a lot of the more dangerous wildlife away from the work sites and away from the people. It's not unusual to see polar bears. We have grizzly bears. The caribou and the muskoxen aren't really what I would say vicious, but they do get ornery, so they do need to be shooed away from time to time. Bear police are like, yeah, we'll get out there as soon as we can. And we have to wait about 40 minutes for them to make it all the way out to our location. And this whole time we're waiting, this wolf is just watching us. He never leaves our line of sight the whole time. He just kind of paces back and forth, and he never lets his eye off of the truck as he's pacing. The bear police show up. It's 2 men. They honk their horn. He doesn't even acknowledge that the truck is there. He's just keeps his eyesight right on us. They try to kind of push the truck towards him, and he does not move. So they move on to the beanbag gun, and they take a shot, and they hit this wolf right in the ribs, and he lets out a yelp, and he trots off into the tundra. Before they left, they told us, hey, if you see him again, just give us a call. The bear police leave, and I'm right back to work. The sun is starting to go down. Our equipment starts acting up. It starts not giving us the right data. It's almost like it's recording things backwards. It's just not making any sense. I tell Eric, I was like, hey, can you walk out to the wellhead and just see if all the cables are hooked up, like see if there's anything that's going on out there. Maybe the cables are loose. Maybe that's why it's giving us these weird readings. And he goes, yeah, no problem. He walks out there. I'm still trying to figure out the problems, troubleshooting in the cab. And we hear this blood-curdling scream followed by the deepest howl you have ever heard. And I see this giant, dark figure on two legs running out of this well house. 7-8 feet tall. It's huge, and just like a flash, it's just gone into the dark. And I'm like, wait, is that Eric? And then I see Eric running out immediately afterwards, and I'm like, well, no, then who was that? Eric is running at full speed right to the cab, and he jumps in, and he's as white as the snow. Like, he's just sheet white. He's out of breath. He's panicking. Like, he's having a full-blown panic attack. We're like, what happened? And he can just get out, wolf. You know, we're like, just drink some water, just breathe, you're fine, nothing got you. We get him to calm down, and he finally gets to the point where he can kind of talk a little bit, and he says, I went out to the well house, and I noticed some of the cables were loose on the wellhead, so I start tightening them up, and I hear somebody walk up behind me, and I think it's one of you guys. I say, hey, hand me that wrench. And there's no response. Eric's like, what? Why is nobody talking to me? And he turns around, and there's this great big wolf, and he's standing on two legs, and he's got this big, toothy half grin and a big blazing red eye right behind him. Eric's like, he had to have been 7 feet tall. He was gigantic. And he said, the only thing I could do, I took my wrench and I threw it at him, and I hit him square in the nose. And he just let out this loud howl and ran off. Everything Eric's telling me it's kind of cutting me to the core. Like, I can feel it in the pit of my stomach. I don't want to believe what he's saying, but also I can't deny what my eyes have seen. I am totally sure that I saw something on two legs run out of that well house. The bear police get there. They're driving around the well site, flashing their lights, just looking around, scanning the whole area. It takes them about 10 minutes to scan the entire well pad. They were like, well, we found these hind tracks, but they don't really go anywhere. They just circle the well house for a little bit, and then they just kind of disappear. Eric was feeling better, and he's like, yeah, you only found hind tracks because it was walking around like a person. But the bear police are like, well, wolves don't do that. And they leave at that point and go on their way. I did not want us out there in the night any longer. I don't know if this thing's going to come back. We're just on our own. So I'm hurrying with my crew to pack up as fast as I can, and we're constantly looking over our shoulders. I'm totally on alert, checking my surroundings every chance I get. As soon as we got in the truck and started to leave location, it was kind of like a wave of relief. When we got back to camp, that was when we really felt like we were safe again. After this event, I'm trying to replay over in my head what I actually saw. I clearly saw something big, upright on two legs walking out of there, but that doesn't make any sense. I try to rationalize why we might have been targeted. It's entirely possible that, they were not happy with the operations that were going on up there with the oil and gas exploration. They could have been trying to warn us off or in their own way tell us that we were not welcome there. I've always considered myself a huge skeptic, but the things that I've seen on the North Slope have opened me up to the possibility that there are things that we just can't explain in this universe. I'm still a skeptic on most things, but I now have a little bit more of an open mind on what could possibly be out there.
Big thanks to Forrest for sharing his story with The Spooked. The original score for this piece was by Doug Stuart. It was produced by Zoë Ferrigno. Now, Snappers, if this story spoke to you, know that Snap's Evil Twin podcast Spook is dropping all new material. Magical, mysterious, mythic, spooked, Season of the Wolf. Amazing stories from people who can scarcely believe it happened themselves. Available right this moment on each and every podcast platform each and every week. Spooked. Now, after the break, there's another creature I'd like you to meet. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Snap Judgment, the Howl episode featuring magical journeys from our Evil Twin podcast, Spooked. My name is Glenn Washington. Spooked. I don't know if you remember Todd Nairn, who took us all over North Carolina chasing cat bone curses and boating around Barbara Nichols Pond. Well, Todd is back, but this time he's got a whole different kind of story. Spooked.
I've written the story down, but I haven't always wanted to tell it out loud. But after all these years, I'd like to tell it for you. The story began in 1979, and all us kids had just gotten back from school after Christmas and New Year's break. So when I walked in my classroom in Mrs. Dean's 8th grade classroom, I saw something strange. It was a little fella sitting at my desk. Now, this wasn't just a regular desk. It was the best seat in the house. Right beside the radiator and big window to look out of and daydream anytime I wanted to. I intended on keeping that desk, so I went up and told him to get up or get beat up. He looked at me and said, "You ain't got your name on it," of which I said, "Yes, I do." And I pointed to it, Todd Curtis Nairn, in the right-hand corner. After seeing my name, he licked his fingers and smudged it out and began to tell me It was his desk now, and for me to get lost. About this time, the teacher showed up and told everybody to have a seat for roll call, pledge allegiance, and flag, and a prayer to the Lord. The teacher then introduced our new student to the class as Luther Riggs and asked us to make him feel real welcome. I made him feel real welcome all right as I took a nearby seat and made threatening gestures to him while the teacher wasn't looking. He just rolled his eyes and mouthed, "Come on and get some if you think you can." I mouthed back to meet me at recess in the boys' dugout. The news of the upcoming fight spread fast, and by the time I got to the dugout, it seemed as if half the school was there to see a Muhammad Ali fight. I then jumped into the dugout, and to my surprise, he was already there. All 60 pounds of him. I thought to myself I was going to put a whipping on him until he cried. And at about that time, that little rascal popped me on the top of the eye. Now, with us other boys, we would fight, but we would never hit each other in the face. So after I got over my shock, I grabbed him around the neck and tried to squeeze his head off with a powerful 8th grade headlock. And then basically, I just put my weight on him and he hit the ground first, which we all know made me the winner, even though my eyebrow told another story. When we got back to class, I took my desk back. Life's hard on the little things, and he just happened to be one of the little things. Anyway, so that was my first day with Luther Riggs. The next day at school, me and Luther just kind of stared at each other and shrugged our shoulders and smiled. And after that, we became good friends. So he lived just down the road from me, and I would help his family on the farm, and he would help us on our farm. When we kids weren't working, we played war in the woods. Every war from the Civil War to Vietnam. Luther Riggs was small in stature, but he made up for it in heart. He would do anything from riding hogs, jumping off barns with umbrellas to see if he could float down. I could tell he was hurting sometimes, but he would bounce right back up and do it again. The neighbors accused us of raiding gardens and stealing watermelons, but they never really saw us. Yes, sir, we became good friends, me and Luther Riggs. Sadly, his daddy died the next year from a heart attack. And that just left him and his mama, and they grew to be very close. I at least had a stepdaddy that treated me well, so I didn't have all the pressures of life like Luther Riggs and his mama had. We passed the summer together working to keep things going for the little farms, raising cucumbers and tobacco. Time seemed to just roll along as we grew up together, and Luther Riggs ended up being bigger than me by our junior year. I sometimes think he just kind of carried me around like a brother as he grew bigger and faster. As he began playing sports in school, his mom would go to every game to cheer him on, and right beside her would be me. The next summer finally came, and it was time to pick cucumbers and carry them to the market before the tobacco season started. His mother had gotten some money after Luther's daddy died, and she bought 2 more acres of land. Unfortunately, she bought a field right beside Buck Parker's cow farm, and the fence came out right up to Luther's field. And standing in it was a big red bull with a ring in his nose. Mr. Parker teased and poked at that bull, trying to make him aggressive, so he might could put him in nearby rodeos and make a little change for himself. On this particular day, Luther and I started work on the far side of the field. As we went up and down the rows, we got closer and closer to the fence holding that bull. I could tell Luther had his mind on that bull. So I finally asked him, "What are you doing staring over there at that bull?" Luther said that he wanted to try to pull the ring from the bull's nose and get back over. I told Luther sometimes you just got to turn down a challenge, and that we should just finish the work and go home. After a while, we got right beside the fence, working, and that bull walked up to about 20 feet from us. I saw Luther drop his cucumber sack and walk toward the fence. As Luther climbed the fence, I started to tell him to stop, but Luther kept going. When he stepped into the pasture, the bull and the Luther just stood there staring at each other. Until Luther made a quick run toward the bull with his hand and arm outstretched to get the prize. I started across the fence to maybe stop what was about to happen when I saw the bull put his head down and charge. Luther collided with the bull as the horns sunk deep into Luther's chest. And it started to grind Luther on the ground and the fence. I screamed and even took my shirt off and started waving it to get the bull's attention. But it was too late. The bull was mad. It only pushed harder into Luther. After a while, the bull quit and walked away, leaving my best friend dead, halfway hanging on the fence. I ran to Luther not believing what I was seeing. Mr. Parker came because he heard me shouting and somehow got the bull pinned up so we could get him out of the pasture. Well, I was right up there holding Luther until the ambulance people got there, and then they told me to back up. So I just backed up, but I couldn't believe what I was seeing, really. It was just a mess. They worked on Luther for quite a while before pronouncing him dead. As they were taking him away, I reached in for his hand and felt the cold nose ring held tightly in his hand. But back then, you couldn't really cry in front of men. But I would go to the woods and cry. Or I'd cry to my mama. I kept the nose ring, and I just pulled it out and looked at it. And I couldn't believe it. My friend had died for this. And it hurt me to see it. Well, when we went to the funeral, and I waited till they were about to close the casket. When they did, I walked up to Luther Ricks and I put the ring in his hand. And the mama saw it, but nobody else saw it. And I knew they were fixing to close the casket. I put it in there. I don't really know why, other than to just show him that he might have got killed, but he got what he wanted. But, I mean, it really wasn't worth it. His mama saw what I had done and didn't say a word while I was doing it. That was the last time I saw Luther Riggs. But a few days later, his mama called me and asked me to come over, and I did as she wished. As we sat down at the kitchen table, she brought out a handkerchief and pulled the nose ring out of it. It scared me, because I had known what I'd done. I knew where the ring was at. I knew it was the ring. It had a little gap in it. It's a little gap in it, and it was red right around one of the gaps. It felt cold. No matter how hot in the room, that nose ring always felt cold. Kind of like ashes are cold after a fire. I knew it was the same ring, and I just couldn't figure it out. The mama couldn't figure it out. And my stomach, my chest, and my arms felt real heavy, like they were full of blood. And I just didn't know how to handle it. She started to tell me in the night she heard noises, and when she awoke, she found the ring on her nightstand. I didn't know that it was that things could move the way the ring moved and how far away it was. We're talking 4 miles from the house. She continued to tell me that she took it back to his headstone, but it always appeared as a gift to her every time she woke up. I think bringing the ring back to his mama showed that he was maybe a little harder than the grave. She finally carried it back, laid it down, and told Luther to please rest in peace, and that she would see him again in heaven. I eventually grew older, got married, and moved on, but I've always carried Luther's memory with me. Just like his mama said, we'll all be together someday.
Thank you, Todd and Aaron, for joining us one more time on The Spook. Big love out to everybody. in North Carolina. Now it's on. You know it's on. This episode may be over, but the journey continues. Spooked. Spooked is produced by the team that always holds each other's hands in the nighttime. Mr. Mark Ristich, Anna Sussman, our chief spookster Eliza Smith, Annie Nguyen, Renzo Gorrio, Ann Ford, Leon Morimoto, Jacob Winnick, Lauren Newsom. Now, when you feel the unseen hand, you might not know whether it intends good or ill. It may have risen from your past or be torn from your future. Unknowns abound. But understand this. Whatever you do, and wherever it came from, never, ever, never, never, ever, never, 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 ever, never, ever turn out the lights. This walk through the Shadowlands comes from Snap's Evil Twin podcast Spooked, which right now is featuring Spooked Season of the Wolf. Amazing stories from people who can scarcely believe it happened themselves. Available this very moment on each and every podcast platform. Spooked.